focused on the topic Bridging Waters, Water for a Peaceful and Sustainable Future. The event will address the interconnectivity of communities and nations through water and the collaborative effort we need to put in to achieve a future that is water secure, sustainable, and resilient. The focus of this SIWI Seminar Series is on water for ecosystem security. As both the quantity and quality of fresh water declines across the globe, it is imperative that communities, scientists, and water managers work collaboratively to develop solutions that benefit both people and nature. Today's session is the first of three sessions. Our second hybrid session will be at 4 p.m. Stockholm time today at level 2, room C3. And this will be followed by an in-person only session tomorrow at level 2, room 26. The morning's virtual session today will set the stage for the three sessions, providing the context on the role that water plays in ensuring ecosystem security. We will highlight stories from people on the ground who are grappling with problems and developing innovative solutions that work both for people and nature in real life contexts. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Ricardo, who is the Young Scientific Program Committee member on this session, and he will introduce some videos of our young SBC members from around the world.
Thank you so much, Lina, and a warm welcome to all of you joining us from remote. It is really a pleasure to be on this seminar series. And as Lina said, I'm Ricardo Zennaro. I'm part of the team actually behind this seminar series for Water for Ecosystem Security. We're now going to project a few videos that we put together to help showcase the importance of water for ecosystem security.
Hello, my name is Michael Kututua Johnson. I'm a 250th generation Hopi farmer, so let me say that first, but I'm also an assistant professor at the School of Natural Resources and the Environment at the University of Arizona. I'm talking to you today from my cornfield up on the Hopi Indian Reservation, and what's most important to me is the biodiversity that I'm maintaining by continuing these ancient practices of actually trying to grow things in the semi-arid region with only 6 to 10 inches of annual rainfall a year. And so that's very important to me. You know, I do a number of things in my work, but, I'm only focused on food, energy, and water for indigenous communities here in the United States, but I'm also starting to have a global outreach also. But, most importantly for me is that I continue this practice of farming. We up here, we don't have that much water. And some of our issues that we do face with water happen to be the affordability of water. That's one of our biggest problems here on the Hopi Indian Reservation. But for me, working in a field like this field right now, this cornfield where we have no irrigation, and we've been doing these practices for well over 3,000 years, it's really about preserving tradition. It's about maintaining who we are. It's about maintaining our lifestyle so that we have the crops that we need. We are seeing an effect of climate change that is weighing in on us, but we still continue to do what we do because we have tremendous faith and a tremendous respect for our land. And as long as we continue to do that and practice those things, we will be here for another 250 generations, and I really appreciate that. And so thank you for everything, and you guys have a great day out there.
Greetings from Austin. My name is Marisa Bruno, and I'm the Water Program Manager at a Central Texas-based nonprofit that works to protect the land, night skies, and water of our region. For those of you who don't know, Central Texas, also known as the Texas Hill Country, is a beautiful part of Texas with prolific karst aquifers that feed the crystal clear spring-fed rivers. The aquifers and streams of our region support a unique cast of wildlife, from blind salamanders and the wide-mouthed blind cat to the Guadalupe bass and wild rice. In my role, I work closely with local stakeholders and decision makers to enact policies that keep water in our aquifers and keep our rivers flowing. Often, policies that are good for water supply resilience, like policies that encourage rainwater harvesting over digging a new well, are also good for ecosystems. The two major challenges that we face in our region when it comes to water are drought and population growth. We are in the midst of one of the most intense droughts in recorded history, at the same time that we're experiencing explosive population growth. This presents a challenge for our ecosystems. How can we persuade communities to prioritize keeping water in our aquifers and rivers at a time when the stressors on community water systems are greater than ever before? I think that part of the solution is really making the case that our unique water resources and the ecosystems they support are essential to our thriving tourism-based economies. Along with this, we're actively promoting strategies like wastewater reuse, AC condensate capture, and rainwater harvesting because they expand our water supplies without putting additional pressures on our natural systems. Our vision for Central Texas is that it will become a model for communities that prioritize water conservation and as a result, preserve the ecosystems that have benefited communities for generations.
Hello everyone, this is Ricardo Zennaro. I'm one of the members of the Young Scientific Committee for this year's World Water Week, and I've been engaged in the preparations for this very seminar called Water for Ecosystem Security. In my life, I also work on water and wastewater related matters, and this is what I want to talk to you about today. Wastewater being one of the neglected resources for water and for ecosystem security is both an enormous challenge when it's not treated, but also an incredible opportunity when we are able to recover what wastewater gives us, such as energy, such as nutrients, and also to make the best out of it. And most importantly, not to release it untreated in the environment as it happens in many instances, undermining the ecosystem services and also undermining the power of water, the power of life, and also biodiversity and so on and so forth. So if I had to focus on one single message for this seminar, I would say wastewater is an untapped resource, maybe the most important resource. And we have an enormous opportunity to untap when using resources such as wastewater sustainably for the environment and also for human beings.
Hello, my name is Dr. Nandita Singh and I'm Associate Professor in Water Resources Management at Södertörn University in Stockholm. Water for ecosystem security is an important theme in my research, which spans across the global north and south. Today I'm going to talk about one of my studies regarding a lake called Kanwar Lake in India, which is one of Asia's largest freshwater oxbow lakes. This lake plays crucial hydrological and ecological role. It helps in groundwater recharge and buffers floods and is an important habitat for rare migratory birds. For the local communities around, it provides livelihood resources such as water for irrigation and domestic use and fish for consumption and sale. It also holds cultural and recreational value. However, this lake today faces large-scale degradation in terms of both its water quantity and quality. Mismanagement of the lake is the main reason, which is further rooted in conflicting stakeholder interests. The farmers want to dry the lake for creating more arable land, while the fishers want the water but for increasing their fish catch. In such a situation, the solution lies in promoting ecocentrism by raising consciousness about the ecological value of the lake and by engaging all stakeholders actively in the process of its restoration. Towards this end, together with the co-author of this presentation, Om Prakash Singh, who is a visual anthropologist, we have launched a special photo documentary on our water communication platform called Millennium Water Story. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gan Yiwei from Environmental Defense Fund, Beijing office. EDF is a global non-profit organization tackling climate change by boosting energy transition, building a resilient ecosystem and vital earth for everyone. A key area of focusing for our work in China is water, using water efficiency to accelerate energy transitions and water, food, energy nexus study to boost a robust future in both agricultural, water management, and overall ecosystem security. We think the importance of maintaining the ecosystem we rely on is to establish more connections between all related systems, such as water, food, energy. Nexus collaboration will enhance cooperations and lead to stronger and more impactful policies and governance. We are currently focusing on the water issues in the Yellow River Basin in China, as it is the second longest river in China and the fifth longest in the world. Based on decades of experiences and cooperation with both central and local government in the Yellow River and China, we are now pushing for policy in the basin that is water first in an effort to restore the ecosystem. These efforts complement government initiatives, also focus on decision-making and planning relates to industry, city, land use, and livelihood, all relate to the ecosystem. There are still unsolved challenges for both EDF and Yellow River Basin, especially around ecosystem security. In the Yellow River Basin, sustainable water resource management is key to solve water scarcity challenges. The Yellow River Basin has only 2% of China's total water resources, but supports 12% of China's population, 70% farmland, and 70% of coal production. Water use practice in the Yellow River Basin have led to severe pollution and ecosystem damage since the late 1990s. Our current work is now focused on rehabilitating both surface and groundwater. To do this effectively, we must support ecosystem security of the whole river basin area. A few efforts we are focused on specifically is, first, advocating for an updated water resource allocation plan, which has not been updated since it was established in 1987. And second, working with local stakeholders on ecosystem rehabilitation efforts in the Yellow River Basin area. The road ahead is still long, but already we are seeing benefits of a more ecosystem-focused approach with the Yellow River Basin. Rehabilitation efforts over the last years have resulted in restoration achievements such as improved biodiversity, grassland restoration, and land soil conservation. We look forward to seeking out opportunities for further collaboration across the water, food, energy nexus, and continue to build on these initiatives with even greater focus on the ecosystem in mind. Thank you.
Great. I hope you all enjoyed hearing these 5 stories from around the world and that it helped us frame also why water is important for ecosystem security. And now we have a very exciting discussion ahead of us with 2 great panelists and a great moderator. So I'm happy to hand over to Felicia Marcus, who is the William Landred Visiting Fellow at Stanford University. And also she's the former chair of the California State Water Resources Control Board. We are so happy to have you on board, Felicia, and I hand over to you. And before doing that, I just want to remind everyone, please interact with us. This is, we want to have a very interesting discussion with many of you. So use the chat, put your questions in the chat, and we will have a Q&A session after the panel discussion. Thank you, and over to you, Felicia.
Great, thank you so much, Ricardo, for that. That speaker needs to go. Great. Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Ricardo, very much for those great videos, as well as your own, and for putting this all together with Veena et al. Today and Sneha. I'm delighted to join you all in this first of 3 seminars on the importance of ecosystem security. We hope to set the stage and get you thinking today and to lay a foundation for the seminars to come, as Veena explained. Those videos that you just saw are just a taste of the many reasons why ecosystems are important, but also why they've been underestimated in importance, particularly in the case of conflict. Some thoughts. The videos highlight the many faces of ecosystem security, from tensions between fisher people and farmers, to tensions over whether water's clean enough for consumption and sanitation or plentiful enough, and to concerns over the natural environment that is all of our birthright and heritage. From at least a 200 generation perspective to some very contemporary, we heard just a slice of the issues that appear when we start talking about ecosystems. And part of the challenge is that it's such a complex arena, with some places and people understanding the connection between the natural world upstream and our economic and physical health downstream, but only some. The issues and conflicts touch economic competition and community viability, with different geographies and different people within the same geography, seeing the same water body or ecosystem in completely different ways. Over the course of my career, I've been in meetings, for example, that have to do with wetlands, where some people in the room see and talk about a beautiful ecosystem essential for spawning life and cleansing water, and others in the very same room see a stinking mud hole and can't figure out what the other people are talking about, and vice versa. Our laws and regulations that have developed over the past 100 to 200 years often don't take ecosystems into account and take single species focus or single lenses on issues. And even when they do, the policy dialogues are challenging and frequently disjointed. And yet, we face a future where ecosystem restoration of all kinds is our only hope for coping with climate change, and in some cases, our only hope to assure cleaner and more plentiful water for people and wildlife. It's all connected, and yet water itself is frequently taken for granted or given lesser status than even other environmental issues, and ecosystems fall even lower on the priority list for policymakers. It's actually remarkable in these times that so many people have forgotten so much of what everybody knew just 100 or 200 years ago. And in our rush to modernize or develop, we've forgotten, or in some cases chosen to undervalue or intentionally dismiss the importance of the systems that we evolved to be a part of. Fortunately, while some people have never forgotten how ecosystems and watersheds are connected, from mountaintops to river bottoms or the sea, particularly at the indigenous community, even non-indigenous community level, more people over the past decade or so are recognizing the need not only to protect ecosystems nearby that they can regularly see, but they are also mobilizing resources to do so to protect biodiversity, water supply, and the planet's atmosphere. In California alone, billions of dollars are now being spent to return our overgrown and overplantationized forests into more recognizable natural forests, which will help prevent the catastrophic wildfires that are now emitting more carbon than fossil fuels. This ecologically based restoration also has enormous co-benefits for water by creating spaces for what snow we still receive get to the ground and stay covered enough to have a chance to last. That snow can then slowly melt out to restore our streams and reservoirs and seep into our groundwater basins at a speed they can absorb. That timing boom from snow is our greatest storage reservoir in many places, and that timing is critical to allowing for plentiful agriculture and communities downstream. Longer residence time also means cleaner water flow downstream, and the creation of meadows through uncovering near surface springs and stream paths also leads to refugia for wildlife and that same slowing of the flow that is so essential. Preventing those wildfires also protects wildlife and keeps sediments and toxics from running down into our reservoirs and lower waterways. And there are examples of this happening increasingly in all parts of the world, from doing that to restoring floodplains instead of creating higher levee walls, to ripping out concrete to restore stormwater capture and creating green space in the urban core of Los Angeles, and figuring out how to work with water rather than against it. For example, where in San Francisco Bay, they are going to be using terraced wetlands to buffer sea level rise as forests, while also creating ecological value and urban areas. And there are more and more of these in upper watersheds and river basins and in urban communities. And yet at the same time, we still have those fights between fisher people and farmers that you heard about, and are on the brink of losing iconic species like salmon in California to the detriment of all the people who depend on them for sustenance, cultural uses, identity, or our sense of ourselves. That comes from not understanding ecosystems. We don't protect what we don't understand, and understanding the importance of ecosystems is far less than it ought to be across the globe. Our two panelists come with varied and impressive experience working across watersheds and great distances over many countries. They've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, as well as the invisible. Ismail Sunda is the CEO of the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions and comes with 30 years of experience, mainly in the development sector. He's worked for research and academic institutions, as well as international development agencies. Gina Gami is the director of the Global Water Initiative at Forest Trends Association. I spent many years working on the transformation of natural infrastructure for water security in Peru. She's also worked at the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, ICLEI, and at McKinsey & Company. First, I'm going to ask each of them to spend about 5 minutes giving their observations on the importance of ecosystem security and what they've seen in terms of other people's assessment, awareness, etc., of the issue. Then I'm going to ask them a few questions, and then I'm going to turn to your questions before handing it over to Pars Larshan for closing comments and perhaps a few words about the rest of the seminar session, in addition to what Veena had to say. Pars is a member of SIWI Scientific Program Committee, and he is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Ragancel's Group. So with no further ado, I'll turn it to you, Ishmael.
Thank you, Felicia, for those introductory remarks. As Felicia said, my name is Ishmael Sunga. I work for the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions, which is an association of national farmers' unions, 20 of them in 16 countries in Southern Africa. We are really dealing at national level here and not directly at the farmer level. So my remarks are going to be more speaking to what I pick up and what I engage with my national member organizations, which are very diversified, by the way. Some of them are very commercially oriented and large-scale, data-driven, science-based, coexisting with a large group that is doing agriculture more as a subsistence type of activity than commercial. And if you really talk about water, I mean, reflecting about water in the context of the things that we do, rarely do we speak of water as water. I think that's the first point. We speak of water in the context of drought, when it is not in plentiful supply, or when it is erratic. That's about where our conversations go. And yet, from what I understand now, it's a vast area that is talking about different issues, different options. But I think a key problem for us is that we only realize that something is important when it is in short supply. As long as it is in plentiful supply, such as it has been prior to the advent of climate change, that did not seem to be an issue. Even if it was oversupplied, it was not so much of an issue. It was a luxury problem, so to speak. But now we are confronted with it. But the problem we're faced with is that we are, in general, as smallholder farmers associations, not data-driven. We don't know how much of it actually do we need, even if we know that it is in short supply. We don't know when actually it is in oversupply, other than seeing it as a crop failure at the end. So we are not able to anticipate and manage it so that we get the best out of the quantities we have. So if we don't measure it, naturally, you won't be able to manage it. So I see hope in the future that we need really to ensure that we understand our water stocks, be they rainfall or underground, or that which is in the reservoirs, and begin also to understand what are the crop water requirements by crop or by livestock. Quite often, we know that livestock requires water. We know that crops require water, but by how much is actually something that, in general, I would say that my constituency has not invested in. And I think that is a very important point for me, that if we don't really take stock of what we have and understand the different appetites for water by the different cropping systems, by the different types of crops or livestock, we won't have done good justice because we don't consciously think about these things. We talk in this conference about the nexus of water, energy, and food. Farmers, and as you might know, are not in that space. They don't talk about nexuses in that sense. They really talk about just in the context of food for the crops and for the livestock. So I see the role of my organization and those that are associated with us to really go into the ABCDs of water and begin to sort of talk about water literacy as a first start and the different options of actually maximizing and also looking at the whole ecosystem. We do think about ecosystems, but I don't think we're intentional and deliberate about it. My call really, got 1 minute left, is really to look at a much more structured way of driving the water agenda, particularly for smallholder farmers in Southern Africa. And my organization is primed up for that. And I'm interested to form coalitions and partnerships to begin to walk that journey. It will be long, but it will be worthwhile. Over to you. I ran my 5 minutes. Over to you, Felicia.
That was great. Thank you very much. And thanks for watching your own time. I appreciate it. Well done. Well done. And I appreciate the up note, but I think my quote of the day is going to be farmers don't talk about nexuses. That was so true. And nor do most people in general. Thank you. Tina, take it away.
Thanks, Felicia, and thanks again to the organizers for the opportunity to share a bit of our experience here today. And I think I'll pick up on the idea of a nexus. So this session is about water for ecosystem security, and what I want to talk about is how this all circles back, and water and ecosystem security is then in turn also critical for water, as well as the multiple values that it provides for local communities and communities at different scales, and not in a small way. And so that also helps us to understand again why we need to ensure that we are making water available for ecosystem security. So it's not a small way. A couple of years ago, a study was done that showed that over 99% of freshwater storage is actually in nature. So this is, water is stored in things like glaciers and lakes. It's also stored in wetlands and in soils. And this is why over, for millions of years before we had any reservoirs built or gray infrastructure, we had base flows, and we had the ability to count on water supply to some extent throughout the year. And we had, species and ecosystems developed based on that hydrological cycle. So as we change and interrupt that hydrological cycle, both intentionally and unintentionally, as land use change, reduces the ability for a lot of this natural infrastructure to provide this water supply needs, results in degradation of these ecosystems or loss of vegetative cover. We're also losing a lot of that capacity that we have depended on for a long time. So sometimes when we talk about interventions in natural infrastructure, nature-based solutions, it might sound like something new that we're doing. But as a lot of the videos pointed out, and as you mentioned in your opening remarks, Felicia, a lot of it is about just maintaining what we have depended on already for so many years. One of the studies that we've done has shown that through a systematic review of the literature, that areas that have the vegetative cover degraded are 9 to 12 times more likely to erode. So that is a problem both for the water quality and sedimentation downstream, including for our built infrastructure. It's a problem for increased likelihood of things like landslides. And it's a problem because we don't have that soil in place to be able to support both the water stores, water infiltration, and all of the other things that we need good soils for, including for agricultural production and other uses. When we think about what we can do to ensure that we are protecting and sustainably managing these areas, a lot of times looking to those indigenous practices that have evolved over thousands of years with these ecosystems can give us a lot of great clues. And I enjoyed seeing some of that in the videos that were shared. And it reminds me of some of the work that we've done in Peru, for example, where we've studied pre-Incan infiltration canals called amunas that can be extremely cost effective in recharging groundwater that supplies springs and provides water storage for up to several months between the rainy season and the dry season. And these indigenous practices also often interact with different aspects of the ecosystem, different types of biodiversity. So one example that I love is in Peru, the native alpaca are really important for Andean grasslands. Their hooves are a lot lighter on the grass, so they don't compact the soils like a cow does or other cattle would. And they also help to spread the seeds of the native grassland, which helps with kind of natural regeneration. So oftentimes we think of these kind of different, aspects, we kind of separate out these different aspects of the ecosystem, and we don't recognize how part of the ecosystem security and therefore the services that we depend on the ecosystem really depend on it working together in all of these different components that have evolved over time. It's often not recognized, but I do want to say it is increasingly recognized, and it's really uplifting to see policy shifts in financial commitments, and just the way that the systems that manage and deliver water and that depend on water are now increasingly recognizing the importance of nature for water and vice versa. So I've spent a lot of time on this in Peru, as you mentioned, where there's a paradigm shift underway. So there's new policies and financing mechanisms there that, one, allow the public investment system to see nature as infrastructure worth investing in, including for the water services that it provides. So whereas previously the system that allowed for big public investment in things like schools and hospitals and bridges could not invest in restoring a wetland for water provision, now it can, which is a big shift. It allows for now water utilities to collect a tariff from its users that is dedicated for watershed protection and restoration, and it encourages and supports those utilities to engage in that way upstream. And it's incorporating natural infrastructure into a multi-billion-dollar program of investments to increase resilience to extreme climate events, including floods and landslides. And so we've been involved in helping to facilitate that transformation. And I think that that's part of what's really exciting that we see happening today.
Thank you both so much. I know there's a lot more that you can say, and I'm gonna ask you to do so in the Q&A that I'm about to do for a little bit before we turn to the audience. And I want to remind the audience that use the chat to send your questions in, and Ricardo will be trying to watch them all because I can't multitask quite that well. And then we'll try and answer as many of yours as we can before we close. But I want to start with actually a quick follow-up question to each of you based on what you said. I'll start with you, Gina, and then go back to Ishmael, and then I'll ask you both the same question after, but these are a little more tailored. Gina, can you just say a couple minutes about why Peru? Why has Peru as a country taken this much more comprehensive and aggressive stance on this, fairly complex issue where other countries haven't?
Yeah, I think that between 10 to 15 years ago, a lot of these paradigm shifts really started off, and they started off because of a combination of small initiatives, some pilot projects that were supported from the bottom up, and also with some support from international cooperation that helped to demonstrate the idea, paired with really visionary leadership in multiple sectors at the time. There was great leadership in the head of the environment sector, the head of the water utility regulator, that really saw the importance of not just continuing business as usual, but trying to get ahead of the curve of a lot of the risks that were starting to present themselves. And then those combined with kind of strategic support from, international cooperation, our work is supported by U.S. Agency for International Development and Canada, that with Forest Trends and our partners, we really saw the opportunity to help to facilitate this change in a way that would allow these actors to really realize their own vision by bringing in some of the tools and skills and building some of the capacities and supporting some of these shifts in financing systems that were needed to make it real. And then I do think it's partly just as that paradigm shift is underway, there are opportunities that come up when, as Ishmael was saying, people really begin to recognize the risks because they're feeling the scarcity or they're feeling the impact of really serious floods or landslides. And as we begin as a broader public and as a broader set of institutions in the sector to feel the impacts of climate change, there is often a recognition that we need to do something different. And so having some of those kind of basic policy shifts and supports in place to be able to support that transformation when that recognition starts to become more widely shared was also an important part.
That's interesting because what I hear you saying is something I think sometimes that folks from a more scientific lens don't see, which is, call it politics with a little p rather than a big P, which is seeing a moment in time and seizing it. So Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote The Tipping Point, would be proud of you guys for seizing the opportunity to see a place where you might have early adopters that then could show something to the rest of the world. So really very interesting. Thank you. And then Ishmael, you said something towards the end of what you said about being geared up to start looking more seriously at ecosystems, going from where people didn't really think about it. And this will sort of respond to one of the questions we'll hear later coming in, but what do you think you might do, or what are you thinking about doing to integrate the ecosystem notion into your work going forward? Your point about how we need information and data, I think, is spot on, and a place where there's a void almost anywhere, but in this arena, being able to even contemplate what you might get out of efforts that you might do is still a pretty nascent science, although this conference in particular has a lot of sessions on how people are starting to try and do that. But I'm curious as to what you think you might be doing next.
Thanks, Felicia, for the question. At least we have a starting point in the recent food system sort of process that is really bringing a lot of consciousness to a lot of leaders to look at things from a multi-dimensional sort of approach and not be siloed. And as a regional body, and also working with national structures, I think we are better positioned to be able to engineer deliberately and intentionally that kind of thinking and seed it, bed it down to our members and begin to have conversations about the interconnections that are there. I think in general, people understand that things are connected, but I think there are two, without being scientific about it, because I'm not a scientist, so I can't even pretend. You know that some things are linked, but there comes a time when you have to consciously understand that this is what it means. Beyond just having it known that it is, I think there is much more that can be done to try and translate that knowledge into meaningful actions. And as I said earlier on, being in the position that we are in, which is more cross-border, there are a lot of cross-border water issues. And in any case, most of the water issues in the different countries that we are represented are the same. So for me, that sets the bedding for good conversations between the private, the public, and the farmer sector. Quite often, those conversations, I know they are not balanced because the kind of capacity, intellectual or otherwise, that farmers have is not sufficient or strong enough to have balanced conversations between the private sector, which tends to be very strong, as well as the public sector that seems to be very strong. But part of our role will be to try and bring that kind of informed and capacity strengthening for our members to be able to engage. Again, harnessing on what we did already within the food system. It will be an extension of that to bring the connections. But having said that, I think it's important that whatever connections, what we put forward or we want to motivate for, we have to bring meaningful value and change. If it does not result in significant change, particularly to the farmers, the adoption and moving forward with the connection becomes a bit tenuous. I like what Gina was talking about, which is one of my hobby horses. If you don't give value, if you don't see water as an infrastructure, which is worth investing in, not only as a public good, but also from a farmer side, that if they invest in water and create instruments that will enable them to do that, also understanding that it is a major contributor to climate change and to mitigation and adaptation, and have softer, for instance, credit lines, green financing, and also having maybe green subsidies, as an example, maybe it's a swear word, but also green fiscal and monetary policies designed to nudge the behavior of farmers, particularly speaking of my constituencies. I think with creative thinking and with partnerships with you guys we should be able to drive the agenda well. I hope I've said something meaningful. Over to you. Thanks.
No, that's great. I'm glad I asked. And I do think there's a need, not just, I wouldn't say that farmers are less able to live in that policy world. They're busy growing our food. That's like hard work. And I think one of the things we need to do is to get a lot more respect on the part of policymakers for the hard work that farmers do. I mean, I think we do have this, as much as we have a separation from our ecosystems, in many places we have a separation from where our food comes from. Not understanding, or thinking of farmers, in some cases, sounding like we think of them as polluters, or that they're growing food in order to draw water away from a fish or something. I mean, we do need a much more sophisticated view, not just of our relationship to the ecosystem, but our relationships to each other. So I really appreciated what you had to say. Let me move on to some questions for you. You've answered them in some part, and then I'm going to move to the, I'm going to let Ricardo share the questions that that have been coming in. We have a handful actually, not just a few. So I may not ask all the questions we were going to ask, but I wanted to give you a chance to comment on the videos. If there was anything that popped out, I think Gina talked about them a little bit, but is there anything about the videos that popped out for you that you wanted to share? Either of you? No.
Sure. No, I think part of what we're reflecting on is when we want to actually, and it builds off of what you were just saying, Felicia, about our need to also rethink how we relate to each other. So I think a lot of times when we think about, ecosystem security or what we could do with nature-based solutions, we kind of forget about the people who are living in those areas and who have been stewarding those ecosystems, who depend on those ecosystems, who are living day to day and really know them much better than we might from wherever we're sitting. And really, in order to be able to act with the speed and at the scale that we need to use some of these instruments, like big investment projects, or be able to channel money from capital markets to be able to do some of this work. And oftentimes the channels that are available to us to do that are not really compatible with a partnership approach with those local communities or actors who are there on the landscape, like Mr. Kotutwa Johnson, the Hopi farmer from Arizona who was in the video. Dr. Singh's work also highlighted the complex dependencies and interdependencies of people who live around that lake that she was studying. And different ways that if you begin to change the management of that ecosystem could affect different things like water supply or agriculture or fishing. And so I think it's a tension that we need to be able to act quickly and at scale, but also with the level of quality and in relation that we have not necessarily been able to do effectively in the past. So it's a challenge for us, but I think it's something that the videos very much highlighted, and I think is a great challenge for us today.
Great. Ishmael.
Yeah, what struck me most was apart from drought, dealing with drought was the community and ecosystem sort of framing, and was just trying to relate it to the circumstances that are common in Southern African countries, particularly where we have smallholders. That the community sense is, in my view, not too much about agriculture. It is about the entire livelihood system, of which agriculture is one. So whenever we talk, in my view, of those communities, quite often I think we make a mistake by calling them agriculturalists and then try to hit them with agricultural ecosystem solutions when they are total human beings that have multiple requirements. So, and they are actually center points for that approach. But because when we approach them in taking part of that segment, and perhaps that segment of agriculture is not the primary driver. And we need to be very careful about how we approach people who live in rural areas and for political other conveniences, call them farmers, and then begin to give them. I think we need really a holistic approach because their problems go way beyond farming. It's about health, it's about infrastructure, backbone infrastructure such as water, energy, communication, social amenities, schools. So if we really begin to look at them in that holistic fashion, then those holistic solutions that speak to ecosystems, in my view, become a bit easier. But the last complication for me is this, that in general, agriculture is, smallholder agriculture is predominantly seen as a desperate sector. It's a sector of last resort. When everything else fails in life, you go to that. And really, you really want to ship out as quickly as possible as soon as another opportunity comes up elsewhere. Now, how do you invest? And ecosystems investments are long-term. And the people that are in there maybe are transitive, are not there for the long haul. What is the value proposition that we need to put across to deal with that kind of complication? I think there could be solutions about that. No doubt about it, but we just need to be clear so that we don't brush them with one brush, so to speak, and expect magic to happen. It's much more complicated, but I think with co-creation of solutions, we can make it. Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you. No, that's great. I mean, the integration of people and the ecosystem discussion and respect for people as well as ecosystems is a very important lesson because the dialogue does end up being pigeonholing or caricaturing, whether it's an enviro or a farmer or whatever, and it becomes a little war. And sometimes that's helpful for politicians because the division suits them and their political consultants and lawyers. But if you want to be a problem solver, the people you can see who are good politicians do speak of the more full picture of people, and that even where you have those conflicts, the conflicts aren't between good and bad, which is how they get cast, say between the farmers and the fishermen. And the politicians sometimes will frame it as if one can win over the other, when in fact we need to come up with a more holistic way of thinking about the world and ourselves. So thank you very much for those answers. I'm going to move to the questions that are lining up from our viewers, which are all over the lot, which is quite interesting. And I want to ask Ricardo to actually ask the question. because he's been looking at them more carefully than I can.
Yeah, thank you so much, Felicia. In fact, we had very good questions in the chat and very good. It's quite hard probably to respond to all of them, but we'll try our best to at least pick a few. So I want to start by sharing this question we have from Vina. She's asking, where is the bottleneck mainstream in ecosystem-based approaches? In the ecosystem-based approaches? Is it data and evidence on the quantification of ecosystem services, or is it the science settled and it's mainly a matter of synthesizing and communicating it? I'm turning to both you, Gina and Ishmael, for hopefully, if we can keep it short, your answer. Thank you so much.
I think I can jump in on that. From where I sit, I think we have enough science to make good decisions, to make good investments in ecosystems for water security. The issue that I think maybe becomes a bottleneck in some of these decisions is that there is uncertainty associated with a lot of these investments. I think we need to also recognize that we are living in a new climate, a new context where there's uncertainty associated with all of our decisions about how we are going to manage water. I think we have a sense of kind of false security in the more, conventional solutions that have been, part of this, paradigm of the last 150 years of how we engineer our way out of water problems. That increasingly, and as places around the world begin to confront more and more serious challenges, especially associated with climate change, they just are not enough to be able to tackle a problem alone. And so I think, we have enough to get started. I think part of it is kind of being a bit comfortable and taking a bit more, some bolder decisions, but recognizing that that's not necessarily only because of nature-based solutions. That's because of the moment that we're living in and kind of the challenges that we're facing now. And then I think that we do need some really important institutional paradigm shifts that require new types of implementation mechanisms, some more innovative financing mechanisms, new like upskilling. We need a generation of engineers who are able to work with, social scientists and community engagement people, and able to think about integrating nature into more conventional infrastructure solutions. And those are really systemic shifts that in capacity that will allow us to be able to deliver and deploy these solutions at the scale that are needed, that I think is kind of the next bottleneck that honestly I think we are not thinking enough about to ensure that we're not caught flat-footed once we do have more of the opportunity through policy and finance to deliver on these solutions.
Thanks. My will be a short answer, perhaps. The science, I think, is there, but that's from the scientific point of view. And quite often, and people might wonder why I'm saying it, science sometimes don't speak to farmers. They were their own language. So until that science has been sort of abstracted to make sense to those it's supposed to be communicating to, it remains not a well-done job. So the question is, are also farmers, are also scientists in that, or not in that conventional, in their own right? There's need to understand how they understand that things have changed and why, and which might clash with science or might actually buttress each other. But it's important because you're trying to communicate something that you say figures are saying or research is saying, but there might not be sufficient understanding of what research is, and might believe what they think their experience tell them. And as long as the two don't bond, so there is need to look at ways of how to communicate the outcomes of science and also verify those outcomes with the community to try and get much more the the hard evidence about it. But much more fundamentally for me is, what does it all mean if it comes together in terms of transforming the almost near destitute lives of farmers? What does it mean ultimately? If that is not also marketed about that value proposition, that it will result in significant, not marginal, but significant transformative change, it might be difficult. It remains a pie in the sky, in my view. So, but I think there's solutions to that. She's talking about how a new generation of engineers, a new generation of social scientists, a new generation of policymakers, because we've done things the same way that we've been doing them before. I see Ricardo might be telling me to stop now. Let me pause, then I'll take it later.
No, it's very good. I think we have time for one more question if the answers are really short, because I want to leave at least a couple minutes for Par. So Ricardo, do your best, and then what we'll try and do, because you should be able to download the chat and find it, is we'll share the rest of your questions with the panel, and we can send you email responses.
Thank you so much, Felicia. In fact, we have literally 1 minute, because at 10 sharp, the organizers will also leave us. We will have to leave the room. But I have just one question that I want to ask you, and it's about how can we create awareness, more awareness, and highlight the importance of water for ecosystem security. Maybe half a minute, both of you, Gina and Ishmael, and then back to you, Felicia.
Okay, I'll give it a go. We have in my sector, in my organization, we have cascading structures from the African level to the Southern African or regional levels down to the national levels, and then cascading downwards. I think using those structures to create awareness and consciousness is important. It's part of the job that we do. So it's within the ambit of the work that we do. Should not be too difficult once we've bought into the idea, as you might see that I already bought into the idea. Thanks, over to you.
Yeah, and I just building on what you said a second ago, Ishmael, I think that we also need to get better at telling the stories of sort of how these types of solutions and investments work and land on the ground and benefit local people and work within their traditions. But then not forgetting to pair those stories with how does that work also in different scales. So how does it also then support further downstream, and how is this part of a larger paradigm shift? But telling those stories in a way that's less wonky and more human-centered.
Great, thanks. You both did that perfectly on time. So Par, take it home.
So much. So really great to hear what you have been speaking about. And I summarize Ricardo's who started with talking about the importance of utilize the resources in wastewater. Exactly what I was ending my speech with at Unia 6 in Nairobi on the 1st of March. The problem is that we have just 50% of the water in the world, wastewater in the world, are today treated. And another thing is that today's wastewater treatment plant has the obligation to do bad things less bad. Ismail, smallholders, yes, the access to water are the key thing. I've seen it for myself in Mozambique, Rwanda, and Malawi. And of course, here we need to have a system thinking, because the smallholders can't have access to water if we don't change the way how we treat water. Gina, impact from climate change has a direct effect. Exactly what I was speaking about at WTO in Geneva here in June. We see now that the global community are really taking up and doing things, and we need to take it on a system level. Next session will be at 4 p.m. CET, this time in Stockholm, on site but also online. And it's session number 12,060. We will now take living lab examples, and I will also give a keynote starting with my WTO speech. But thank you so much. It was a great first session. And let's now say that Stockholm Water Week has now started for real. Thank you.
Thank you.